Aaron, your notice of motion.
Yes, just that the council released the draft.
Yep. But you're moving the notice
I'll
of
move
motion, and as I understand it, Phil Major's seconding it.
Yep.
Right. So I have been advised that council staff can answer any questions that you have on the briefing note that they sent around, but I'm not sure that people do have questions, but maybe I'm wrong. Just one question.
Just one quick one to Aaron as a point of clarification. Why did you not just do this by way of Lagoina?
No. That is not a question you can ask, because you've got to, I just said to you, the only questions that you can direct are direct to staff on the advice that they gave us on the notice of motion. The notice of motion is technically not, it's going to be debated and put. It is, but you can ask questions of staff who don't appear to be here, but it's only on that narrow question. You can certainly raise that issue in debate, but only as a rhetorical question. Okay, all right, no questions of staff. So Aaron, I'll allow you to move the, I'll allow you to speak to the motion.
Okay, just to clarify, if I speak now, is there a right of reply?
Yes.
Okay, sweet as. So I just believe that we should release this. It was originally intended to be released around this time. It's a very important part of what this council will do in the coming years. Some would say one of the most important. I would agree with that. And I think it should be in the public domain. The public have a right to know what our thinking is going to be, mainly because there's an election coming up, and I think there's a number of issues that are in this document that should be election issues, and I will, and interesting, the chair of the working group, the outcome is to reduce the carbon footprint, and with that I 100% agree with them on how we get there is different, but having the conversations in public is, I think, vitally important, because the people of Christchurch should know who and what they're voting for in the coming election, and candidates that will take this document seriously are the ones that should be around the table, and those that aren't that interested probably shouldn't be here, and so because it is that important, and I'll leave it at that, and if I need to reply I will, but yeah, nothing to hide here. I think it's a good conversation point going forward over the coming month.
Thank you. I'd just like to speak myself. There is a degree of frustration that I have in speaking to this notice of motion. Although the meeting started with a presentation that supports the vision I brought to this role of communities owning their own future, seeing council as the facilitator and enabler, not as the decider and provider. So that was a great start to the meeting. But this is what I won't miss from this council. No one raised this with me at any time since the Movers Community Board was briefed on the proposed change to our decade-old transport plan that gave us the Northern Corridor, thanks very much. When they were briefed on the 30th of May, no one's raised it with me, and so nobody's asked that the document be put online. I've got no objection to it going online, but I do want people to understand that it is not the draft that will be consulted on next year. The next council will decide what will be contained within that document, and the consultation doesn't begin until 2023. There is no point putting this in the public arena unless there's a motive that I don't understand. There was an expectation at the time that the community boards were briefed that this council would endorse the goals, outcomes and policies with a report to the incoming council and public consultation commencing early next year. I thought it was not appropriate that we made a sign-off on the overarching direction. That's for the incoming council. But, you know, that's the way it sits, because we're not being asked to endorse reduction of our transport greenhouse gas emissions, ensure our transport system supports good growth, healthy streets, healthy people, safe streets. There is nothing controversial about the objectives, and I think Aaron Kewen has said that himself. This is important. I've already agreed that the draft can be published, and the briefing that went to the community boards, that should be published as well, because it shows the image of what the intention is overall. If we don't address greenhouse gas emissions in the transport sector, we will never meet our objectives and goals. And the government knows this, and we know this too. We have to the government's going to make changes to, the people pay road user charges for their diesel. When we don't have petrol anymore and we're not paying petrol tax, there are going to have to be changes. The world is changing. I started my report today talking about exponential change, and exponential change is happening. We're on that curve. We're actually quite flat on the curve, but we're going to be moving very quickly, and this council needs to be ahead of the game. Mike.
Thank you. Look, I'd actually like to thank Councillor Kewen for bringing this notice of motion to Council today. As the chair of the Christchurch Transport Plan, this actually gives me the opportunity to publicly acknowledge and thank people that have helped to develop the Christchurch Transport Plan throughout this term. The plan being a 30-year plus strategic transport plan that has the goals of productive and accessible low-carbon city and a safe and livable streets, with outcomes being emissions reduction, safe streets, good growth, healthy streets, healthy people. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Council's transport team, who are the experts in this field, for everything they've done in developing an evidence-based transport plan that will enable Christchurch to transition to a low-carbon city with safe, accessible, productive and healthy healthy transport system, and also to other council officers who have been involved. I'd also like to acknowledge all the other councillors that have been on the working group who have provided the governance oversight of its development and helped to shape this working draft. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge all the external stakeholders that Council has engaged with during the development of the draft Christchurch Transport Plan, including community boards, Canterbury District Health Board, Ministry of Transport, Waka Kotahi, Ministry of Education, Ngāi Youth Council, Christchurch Multicultural Council, Christchurch NZ, Development Christchurch Limited, Central City Association, Kainga Ora, Accessibility Christchurch, ARA, University of Canterbury, University of Otago, Urban Design Forum, Matapuri, Charitable Trust, Canterbury Housing and Transport, Generation Zero, Massey University, Environment Canterbury, Chamber of Commerce, Police, Fire and Emergency, St John, Go Bus, Ritchie's, Black Cat, Spokes, Cycling Christchurch, Automobile Association, CCS, Disability Action, Blind Foundation, Civic Trust, Ministry for Environment, Littleton Port, Airport, Kiwi Rail, residents associations and business associations. This is just to show that actually this transport plan is being developed with community. I would have loved to have seen this consulted and adopted this term. COVID has prevented that. We've had a number of staff in turnovers as well. We just ran out of time and it got congested with other things. It disappointed me, but that was the reality of what this year has been like. And while I don't recall Council releasing a working draft before it's finalised, I'm actually happy to show the public this Council's commitment to a safe, healthy, accessible, productive and climate-focused transport system that will benefit everyone, regardless of what mode of transport they choose to use. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
I totally agree with what Mike and Aaron are both saying. And climate change is upon us, and it's important that we go down this road and do what we're doing. How we get there is a different thing. But apart from the guys on the working group, our other councillors and people standing for council in the election that it's coming up are unaware of what is being proposed. And I think it's important that they have the information. So that's the only reason I want to get it out there, so everyone knows where they are. I know it's a draft, but if we just have a bit of a put it out there so we can see what's happening. Thank you.
Could have asked. Anyone else? Sarah?
Thank you. It's fair to say that less than 2 weeks ago I was incredibly jealous when the Auckland City Council signed off on their transport emissions reduction plan. And they did it as a piece of work that had fallen out of their broader climate change strategy. And they did that on an evidence-based, science-based process where staff and councils have worked together, but it didn't go out for consultation. And I think that it's a bonus that we'll be sending this out for consultation. It does mean that it's going to be taking longer. And I think it's excellent that we will have more solid information for people during the election campaign. We know that simply electrifying the fleet isn't enough to address climate change. And we know from information provided to us as councillors and on the working group that it is not actually physically possible to get enough electric or hydrogen, if they ever actually come in bulk, vehicles into the country to address our emissions. And so that we have to do other things. And as the Mayor said just before, simply electrifying the fleet means that we won't have the fuel taxes needed to maintain maintain our roading network. And so some form of road pricing will be needed in the future, and that's what this is. There is no smoking gun, it's not radical, it's bog standard transport planning that's being used the world over, and it will be good to get this out so that people can see it. The scaremongering that has been happening took some things out of context, and you can see from the plan that it talks about the fact that our current system forces additional costs on people because we don't give them low-cost sustainable options for their transport around our city, and we plan to change that. Don't listen to me, listen to the Insurance Council of New Zealand, listen to our communities who say that they want us to act on this and to take a leadership role and to give them more options. Listen to Brad Holson, who at the Zone 5, Zone 6 conference last year, when asked about what council needs to do about climate change, said, as much as possible, as soon as possible. We owe it to our communities to give them a livable city, and we owe it to future generations to make sure that they have a city that is livable, that is thriving, and that has turned to a sustainable transport system with livable streets for future generations.
Tim.
Yeah, look, first of all, I want to thank the staff. It's our whole organisation's been under a lot of stress, and so well done. Thank you very much for that. Also, I want to thank Aaron and Phil for bringing this forward, but most of all, Mike for doing the work, leading this transport plan. It's been a really interesting journey, to be quite honest. I just ask people that when they look at it as a draft and not to have a knee-jerk reaction, to take a breath and think about this is 30 years. And look where you will be in 30 years. Obviously, my kids have plans for me, and we won't go there. But you know, like this is really important stuff, and to have that vision. You know, Leanne mentioned, you know, like gave examples of things that people thought about TV and other things, which were absolutely hilarious. But they were people's beliefs way back then. So what will be in 30 years is really, really different. But we've got to start now, and that's the really key thing. So do remember it is a draft. Please take a breath, and it's probably going to be, in this, the way we've done this, is a wee bit more work for our staff, which I'm sure they really encourage and like. But it's really important that this is out and we move forward.
Thank you. Yanni and then Andrew.
Yeah, cool. I think it's really important that we release this. So I'll be supporting option the second bullet point, which is to release the draft in full. And you know, I look forward to seeing what the feedback is that we gave in the briefing and what's been incorporated and worked through. But I think hopefully one of the lessons from this is that, you know, some of our briefings, if we had them in public, we wouldn't be in this situation. So I'm optimistic that the council, probably the new council, will consider at what point do we have briefings that are open to the community to understand all the hard work that's going in to addressing the challenges that we face in the future. And I think, you know, I can see no reason, if there's no reason why this can't be released, and the staff say the draft plan is official information and there are no applicable grounds for withholding it at this stage, then I can't see why we wouldn't have open briefings where we can actually share with the community what the issues are. I am concerned that if we don't release the full draft, that we're given a series of high-level draft policies here, But for those of us who have seen the document, we know there is much more tangible actions underneath these policies that are very specific that the community should be aware of. And so I support us releasing it today. I don't think we should have anything to fear about being transparent with what we've been working on. There are things in here that concern me. I've given that feedback at the briefings that we've had, and it would be really good to see how that has been incorporated into the thinking of the working party, and also to see what our community think of this when we do go out for consultation. But I trust our community to be sensible and reasonable enough to be able to read this information knowing that it's not the final draft, and looking forward to the opportunity to contributing. I think we have to have confidence in our community that when we're open and transparent, people will respect the processes and the work that we're doing. We did that previously with an LTP. The whole development of the LTP was done in a public committee setting of the council with minutes and agendas to work through all the activity management plans, and it actually worked really well. And it didn't break anything or cause any harm as far as I'm aware. So I think this is a good, tangible example of where I think we can improve as a council in regards to transparency. So I totally support releasing the full document in draft.
Andrew.
I note Councillor Davidson's comments about the thoroughness and the robustness of this document, and in particular the wide range of organisations and the wide range of parties who have contributed to it. I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the work that Mike has led as chair of the committee that's been working on this for some time. What was intended to be released when it was ready was a finalised draft document which had been through a full and due process, which would have had the opportunity to be socialised with Mana Whenua and their input gained, and which would have been capable of being consulted on, with an appropriate communications package alongside, communications that of course would have been worked up over a period of time as the final document was put together. What will now be released, and it's important that people see this in context, if this motion passes, and I expect it will, is an unfinished piece of work in draft, without the ability for those communications I just talked about explaining the nature of the document and what it might mean alongside. There is context, and it's important that a document as important as this and its context is well understood. All of this leaves the release of the document open to misinterpretation and manipulation, and in the period just before an election, I would suggest that the risk of misinterpretation, manipulation, and scaremongering might just be amplified slightly, but I do hope I'm wrong in that regard. I'll support the notice of motion. I think in the interests of transparency and timing, it's the right thing to do. There's nothing to hide here. This is a really good conversation to be having about the future of transport, about increasing transport choice, about the effects of transport choice on climate change. And I do think there's a strong argument that before an election is a great time to be doing that, as long as that's in a well-informed way.
Melanie.
I just wanted to say that I think releasing this before the election will actually provide hope to the young people who are looking at maybe voting, and also for the young people who are standing for election, because I didn't listen to the debate at UC, but people have told me how they talked about climate change being their number one priority, which you mentioned. So for those young people who are standing, I hope this gives you some fire before the election results roll in, so that you work hard to get yourselves elected so that we can have a future we can be proud of.
Jimmy Chen.
Yeah, I also agree, this notice motion, because while we review this policy framework, strategic framework, all those challenges very crucial and concerned by the public and the community, like transport emission, road safety, urban form, and the access. They are all crucial the issues. Public would like to know what the council, your view, your vision, your strategic those framework, give them more confidence. Particularly Tuesday of this week, we heard from the government, the central government, they set up the target 2035. those public transport, the carbon emission reduced 41%. But we are all aware, all the city will be 2045, and then all carbon neutrality, and 2030 is all 50% regarding to the kind of carbon emission reduction already. That's ahead from the central government one. So this one we can specify, emphasize clearly. This just early the draft Christchurch public transport strategic plan only, but still need to engage with Manawinawa or some other the community, etc. And also, finalize this draft plan will be the go to the next council. But still, this term council we still do the same thing. So I support the notice motion.
Thank you. Celeste?
I'll keep it short because I think most of what I was going to say has been said. But no, I say thanks to people like Mike and others who've been leading that work, particularly staff. It's a huge amount of work that's gone into this, and I think it's great that we've got a focus on climate change and transport as being front and centre. I know we've been distracted by a lot of other things that perhaps we shouldn't be devoting as much attention to as this, which is about making sure that we're prepared for the challenges ahead. So I'm looking forward to hearing the comments and conversations, being well informed and being led by the people who will be impacted by this, and noting what Councillor Coker said, climate change is the number one issue that future generations are concerned about and engage with. So this is giving them that opportunity to engage, so it's great. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, I do hope in this coming election that the climate change debate is one that's front and centre, especially around transport, because as we know, our transport emissions in the city are big. And the point that was raised before about the Auckland Transport Plan coming out is what motivated me to get this into the public domain, because of I've always been a very mathematical person. It was my best subject at school. I like numbers, and I'm not seeing evidence in their plan that will reduce their carbon footprint enough for the amount of money spent. Everything has to add up. A sustainable plan is sustainably, environmentally, socially and economically. The three must go together. If they don't go together, you end up spending a ton of money and getting not very far. Our city's own carbon footprint has increased. At the same time, we've spent a lot of money on trying to reduce it. Yes, it might be a long game, but the long game isn't happening fast enough. And you can quote your future facts. I'll go for one, that I believe that the future isn't electricity. If we go to electric vehicles, we will mine in the next 10 years as much as mankind has mined in its entire history. That's what switching the fleet to electric looks like. Yes, behaviour change is a big one, and there will be some behaviour change for some people. But as the councillor that moved the original cycleways network, which was meant to be finished 5 years ago, I know we don't have the cycling numbers now that we should have. In fact, they're embarrassingly low from the dreams and plans we had in 2013 to get there. Where we have to get to is a place of change at an accelerated rate, not at an incremental rate. I'm backing, for my future fact, hydrogen. Christchurch, well, the South Island should be the hydrogen capital of the world. We have the highest amount of renewable energy in the world, and we could be making hydrogen and using hydrogen here and leading the way. Why the hell we haven't invited every car company in the world that's doing hydrogen here to set their base here? Why Air New Zealand, when they are switching to hydrogen in the future, don't hub out of Christchurch? Why those invitations aren't there is something that keeps me awake at night. And I was awake at night leading into this debate today, because for me it is a big one, and I'm cutting off now, but I thank everyone for supporting it, and let's have the debates going forward and get outcomes that are future focused.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. And